Collection, the UWI Library, and Dr. Helen Trotman, who is representing the Dean of FMS. We have decided in postgrad to put on this seminar because we're seeing it as a growing problem, certainly at Mona. We're sure it's within the entire university, but we have found in just doing a little survey that a lot of persons in Mona are not aware of how deep and how serious this problem is. So us in FMS postgrad thought that this would be a very useful seminar to put on and to try and educate our colleagues, some unfortunately, which have fallen prey to this very topic. So we will present this seminar, and I'd like to first invite Dr. Helen Trotman to bring remarks on behalf of the Dean.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It is my distinct pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, Dr. Tomlin Paul. First, on behalf of the Dean, let me welcome Professor Clive Landis, Deputy Principal of the Cayfield campus, to our faculty. Professor Landis, we hope that your stay in Jamaica so far has been productive and enjoyable, and we look forward to an informative and lively session on this important topic of deceptive predatory journals. Let me thank Professor Thame and her team for having the vision to mount such a seminar. As faculty, we are constantly faced with the need to publish or perish, so we are constantly looking for journals that will accept our work. It can be particularly challenging for researchers from lower middle income countries who must compete with researchers from developed countries where there's far more funding for research and for publication. It is therefore critical for us to spot predatory journals lest we fall victim to their attractive ploys. I am always wary of journals who invite me to submit papers in subject areas far removed from my expertise, or who promise me that they will publish my paper within 2 to 4 weeks of being accepted. These are the easy ones to spot. The ones, however, that send out calls for papers in my area of expertise and which appear legitimate until you start to dig beneath the surface, those are the dangerous ones. So like you, I am here to learn about the red flags that will cue me in to which journals I can trust and which not to, lest at the time of evaluation of my CV, I am found wanting. So let us all listen attentively and take note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trotman. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Mrs. Frances Salmon. She is a senior librarian and former head of the West Indies and Special Collection UWI Library. The West Indies and Special Collection was established in 1974, and it brings together a number of library and special editions, unique research collections, which we have. Mrs. Francis was part of a library team that played a very integral role in the university's 17th staging of Research Day in 2016 activities for the library under the theme, the UWI Mona Library Trailblazers. She has published and she has been involved in several conference proceedings. She's a member of the editorial committee for the Library Information Association of Jamaica Journal. Mrs. Salmon recognized the need to formulate a policy on succession planning, and in 2015, she was asked to lead a team in articulating the policy. This was to ensure that the library has staff with leadership skills at all levels to facilitate seamless succession. Mrs. Salmon has played an integral part in the library, and her expertise and skills will be very hard to replace. She is well poised to share with us this afternoon on this topic of deceptive predatory journals, and the library's input in this area. Please help me to welcome her to the podium.
No, it's not this one. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Professor Thiem, thank you very much for that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Okay, I got interested in this topic because I was also the editor for MORD, which is where all the staff publications came in to be entered. And we had the same problem, having to verify the articles before we put them up on the MORD database. So anyway, let's get going. So we have to put this in context, and we talk about scholarly publications because this is where the predatory journals exist. So, so scholarly publication is communication of research findings and other publications by academics and researchers, the target audience of other academics and researchers. And so we talk about scholarly publications. And we know, as was stated, is required for appointment, promotion, tenure, conditions of funding, and so on. And so people are pressured, as was said earlier, to have their work published. But the requirements for scholarly publications, because we are all too aware of the annual departmental reviews, appointment committees, and so on. And so, but scholarly publications, go through a process. There's a whole process. There's a rigorous peer review, there's quality assurance, there are the ethical practices that the publishers subscribe to, and of course, usually the publisher does not pay the author because most academics are not publishing to make money, they are publishing to enhance their CV, to put out their research findings, and so on. And so what has given rise to these predatory and deceptive journals is the whole business of open access publications. So what is open access? All right, I'm going to read. Open access ensures that articles are free at the point of consumption rather than charge for access. Open access publishers apply an initial fee at the time the article is accepted for publication. So there's a fee at this time of publication. The fee, known as an article processing charge, covers the cost of production process because they are not charging you a subscription. So they have to have some method of funding the open access publications. And how they do it most times is to ask the author or his institution to pay a fee. All right? So people have the mistaken view that you pay to get your article published. If you pay to get your article published, that is a deceptive or predatory publication. After your publication is accepted, you may be asked to pay a fee, and that is for archiving your work. Most times, since we are middle and low income countries, we may get it waived, or sometimes there is a graduated fee depending on where you're from. But the history of this is because, of course, journal subscriptions have been extremely high. And if part of the process of putting out your material is to have it accessible by the public, and if the journal subscription charges are expensive, it limits the number of people who have access. So what has happened is that this open access movement has come up where institutions and organizations, they have decided to publish their material themselves.
And actually, some libraries have stopped subscribing and put the money into the open access publications instead. So actually, we do have some open access publications here at Mona, and I think that West Indian Medical Journal is now, is it Terry? Open access. I think it is, yes. And there are other UE publications that are also open access. Now, we have to recognize that there are two kinds of open access publications. There's what is called gold and what's called green. Now, the gold access, let me see where my notes allows, the gold access is where the publication is published by the journal publisher. The green access is the green stream is where institutional people deposit their stuff into institutional repositories, like UE Scholar, where you would put maybe the pre-publication edition into your institutional repository, and it would be accessible. There's another means where you maybe have an embargo, and after a certain amount of time, you can put it up on your institutional repository. Okay. So some open access publications. I want to put these up because I know most people may not be aware that they exist. So the first one is a directory of open access journals. We call it DOAJ, and it covers science, medicine, and so on. This was launched in 2003 at Lund University in Sweden, and it has at least 300 open access journals. No, it started with 300. Now it has over 1,000 journals covering all areas of science, medicine, social sciences. The other one is the Public Library of Science, which was founded in 2001. And then there's the Open Library of the Humanities, which was started in 2015. So these are reputable publishers. So if you want to know if an open access journal is reputable, you can go to these sites to see if it's already there. And these are places that you can go to publish your material as well. So open access, the same standards, just like the regular journals, print journals, open access publications follow the same model of rigorous peer review, quality assurance, and ethical practices. The only difference is that it is free to the public, and now it is available online. Some of them are also available in print. So we come to what I was talking about before, the article or book publishing charge. The article or book publishing charge is now, publishing now becomes a service in which payment is given to the publisher for production and hosting of the scholarly object, which is the article that is distributed for free. So you're not paying to get the article published. You're paying to have the article archived and available. So what are these deceptions? Okay. Earlier, I stated that the reputation of institution is enhanced. Institution is enhanced by the staff publications and the staff publication profile. If UWI is out there and people are seeing UE staff publishing, it enhances the image of the institution. Conversely, if we publish in these predatory or deceptive journals, it will also present a poor in reflection of the institution. So how do we identify them? It's getting more and more difficult, I have to tell you. When we started first, it was easy. You saw the grammatical errors, the spelling mistakes, the sloppy work. Well, they got on to us, so they improved that. Then the titles were similar to regular journals. And so we got onto that. And now, as I will state later on, they have actually bought into accepted publishing houses. Okay, so how do you identify? Of course, the first thing you have to do is to look at the people who are involved. I'm not even going to mention the spam that we get, because if anybody falls for that, I can't help them. All right? Because if they promise to publish your article in 3 weeks, there's no way that it can be peer reviewed and all the rest of it in 3 weeks. So anybody who falls for that, we're not talking to them. All right. So you have a responsibility to research and ensure that you send the publisher papers to reputable publishers. Remember that once your paper has been submitted, it cannot be recalled. Can't be recalled. All right? And you're unlikely to be able to submit it anywhere else. You'd have to rewrite or whatever. Also, remember that especially now it is in soft copy, it is a digital copy. So anything, they can do anything they want with it. All right? So first of all, who is the editor? That's the first question you need to ask. Who is this person? All right? You Google him. You go to the institution where they say he's employed. Don't click on any links in their email. Do not follow the links in their email. Get the URL, type it in, and go to it yourself. All right, so that's the first thing. Who is the editor? And as I said, don't click on it. And of course, we're going to go on to some of the time. Okay, their primary goal is to make money. So there will be a fee. A lot of times they don't tell you the fee upfront. After you go through the whole process, then they will say to you, yes, we have accepted it, and the fee for publication is X. You have gone down the road, you have bought into, you have invested your time and so on. You feel, well, okay, let me pay. Because there is a legitimate model where you do pay. So you will have to now be able to differentiate between the scammers and the legitimate people. And of course, they don't care about the quality of the work published. So when you get an invitation to publish, the first thing you do is to go to the publication and see what is there already. What is the quality of the work that is there already? Because if you see spelling errors, if you see grammatical errors, if you see other errors, then obviously it's sloppy work. Sometimes even the layout and how it appears, okay? Of course, they make false claims and promises. We know about the 3 weeks already, but they also claim impact factor, right? They follow all accepted standards and best practices of scholarly publication, all right? And, sorry, no, they fail to follow them, and so on, as mentioned. Most reputable journals do not have to submit to solicit submissions. Solicitations for special issues usually come from the editor of the issue, who is a reputable person in the area. So I'm not saying that you're not to answer to any solicitation, because sometimes reputable journals solicit, usually for a special issue. At that time, the editor of the special issue is usually somebody who is an expert in the field. You can actually check on them and see who the person is. And they usually send out a lot of information, not just we're going to publish, send your stuff, okay? And a lot of times they will contact you personally based on your publication record anyway. So, okay. So now you have to ask yourself, did I receive an unsolicited offer via email? We talked about that already. Is it too good to be true? I always say to people, anything that seems too good to be true is too good to be true. And so you need to just step back from it. They make false claims of peer review. They lie about affiliations with prestigious scholarly organizations. I was just telling my colleagues that I came across one that called itself Cambridge something or other. And the address was in Cambridge, United Kingdom. So, okay, Cambridge University. And I went to the site, and nobody on the editorial board was associated with Cambridge University. And then in digging and so on, because then the list of names were there. So then I started looking at the individuals. One person had done an undergraduate degree at Cambridge University. That was linked to Cambridge University. So if you hadn't dug enough, you probably would have thought, well, Cambridge, and it is in Cambridge, then you would send it off. So you need to do the digging. All right, they name reputable scholars. Another thing, they name reputable scholars to editorial boards without their permission. So if somebody is, you actually might need to have to contact the person to say, are you, or sometimes that is when they know that their name is on the list of the editorial board. When somebody contacts them to say, are you on the editorial board? They just put people's names up there. They had information about article processing charges, and of course, always you, and I want to make a tip here to persons. You must always use your institutional email for scholarly communications. This adds to your credibility. Don't bother to use your Yahoo and Gmail and so on. People, they might not even open it. But if you have a UWI is an institution, they can go to the UWI's webpage, see if you're there and so on. Now, is this published by a reputable institution? And is the contact email Hotmail, Gmail, instead of an institutional email? That's very important, because sometimes that's the only thing that gives it away, the email address, because they cannot get an institutional email address. All right, if the email is the same thing as the publisher, because sometimes they have their web page and their web people, and so the email would come from the publisher themselves. Then you have again to start digging. Okay, so next question, who are the principals in this publication? I spoke about that. Who are the members of the editorial committee? And is there a coming soon message on the page? This happens all the time. You go to the page and it says coming soon, or you can't get any further. No matter how you try to get into the web page, you can't get into it. That's always a flag. Can I access the archived articles? Now, if this is an open access publication, then everything is accessible. So if all you are seeing is the current issue and you can't see the back issues, that is also a red flag, because there may not be any back issues. All right, or sometimes they put up, you try to get in and there are ways that they keep sending you around in circles, and you might get fed up and just not bother, because you cannot get into the web page. Apart from what comes up on the screen, it's difficult. Or sometimes they ask for a password. Now, if it is open access, it shouldn't have a password entry, though that is for things that are by subscription. All right? Are there errors in spelling or grammatical errors? And does the geographical coverage reflect the name of the journal? Because it might say International Journal of whatever. And then when you look at the contents page, all the articles are from one country or one geographic area. It's not international. And it's the same thing for the editorial board. Who are the people? Where do they come from? You know, and so on. No. This one is particularly frightening. All right, Omics International. And I will read two things from you. In one of the first cases of its kind, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is taking action against a journal publisher accused of deceiving its authors. The Federal Trade Commission is asking a federal judge to order Omics Group, the publishers of hundreds of open access journals, to stop making false and misleading claims about its pricing, editorial staff, and peer review practices. The agency is also asking the court to consider requiring the firm to refund authors and conference participants millions of dollars in fees. Okay, that was last year. Now, this year, Omics International, an Indian-based academic publisher that has been accused of being a predatory publisher and disseminating junk science, has acquired two reputed Canadian publishing companies, Andrew John Publishing and Pulsus Group. Some journals managed by these publishing companies include Plastic Surgery, the Canadian Journal of Pathology, the Canadian Journal of Optometry, and the Canadian Journal of General Internal Medicine. Now, these Pulsus and Andrew John are reputable publishers who have now been taken over by a predatory publisher. So it means that all of these journals, now published by Andrew John and Pulsus Group, would have now gone over into predatory journal publishing. So we have to be very careful. And it seems Omics publishes a lot of medical and scientific material. So what we have to do is think and check before we submit. So having done all the research and written the paper, then we have to do the research to get the paper published, right? But it would be to your benefit to do it because, as I said, once you submit it, it doesn't come back. And we had a colleague who submitted a paper to a journal because in addition to publishing these journals, they do also sell papers. So he submitted a paper to a journal, which was never published. But later on, he saw his paper with a different author's name on it on a web page. So they also sell papers. So you submit your paper and they sell it to somebody, they just change the author and that's it. And remember, these digital things, you have no control over it. Once you press that send button, you no longer have control. People can do anything they want with it. All right? Remember, as I said, because they are also in the business of providing papers and so on. So if a good paper comes up, they might decide, okay, this is a good paper. We won't put it in our journal, but we'll sell it. And they might sell it to 2 or 3 different people. All right, so how do you check? Now, there is this Cabell's directory that publishes a white list and a black list. The white list includes 11,000 quality journals. Now, there's a human element here. They actually check them out. They have a checklist and they go through. And the black list, when I checked earlier this year, had 8,300 that failed to qualify, but they were adding 800 each month. So I figured that by this, they probably have 10,000 or more. All right. So Cabell's is where you go. The problem with that, of course, is that we have to subscribe and it costs. But I figured that if all the faculties put together, the cost might not be that prohibitive. We don't have it yet. We tried, but we don't. The library alone couldn't afford it. Campus librarian. Okay. All right. So this is what you have to do. You have to check and keep checking. You check the people who are involved. You look at the web page. You look at the address and things like that. The next thing I want to talk about is conferences, because I became aware of conferences earlier this year. So this is an addition. Oh, the same principles apply to the conference. No, they tend to be held in exotic places. So I figured maybe Jamaica would be on the list of places. I don't know. They're usually not associated with a reputable institution or organization, and usually they are the first. So there's no track record involved, all right? And what happens with these conferences is that they cover, they're not usually very focused. So they cover a myriad of topics, and they have what you call simultaneous sessions and all sorts of things. So you have to look at that. It's not that we can never have a first, but in the same way that you would check for the journal, you have to now check for the conference, because in addition to sending your paper, now you're going to be sending your fees, right? So ask the same questions that you would ask for the publication. Check the email address. Consult others in your field who may have attended previous conferences. You may also want to contact the proposed venue to ensure that the conference is actually taking place there. And be wary of sending your credit card information and your paper. Because again, once you send the paper in, you can't take it back. Once you send your credit card information, who knows what will happen to it. So the conferences have a second level of problems, because there's the paper, fine, but then there's all your credit card things that you have to send. So what I have to say now is that you must be suspicious of all invitations to publish or to present. You know, about 2 years ago, I presented a paper and came home. And then about 3 weeks later, I started getting email. Oh, we have read your paper that you presented, and we thought it was so interesting. Would you like to have us publish it? Do you have anything else? So it was specific to me. They had the title of my paper and everything. So you have to really be very suspicious. All right? I mean, I wasn't interested in publishing the paper anyway. You know, it was not something that I would want to publish. But in any case, they do that. So they go through they do a lot of research, you know. They go through conferences, and so they see what people have presented and they write to them. They go through and see what theses and dissertations have been accepted, and they write to the, so you are a new graduate and you get this offer to publish your thesis. You are really quite elated. So you go off immediately, and what happens is that you can't publish it after that. You can't publish anything else because they make you sign, and the other thing is they make you sign away your rights. Right? I know I wasn't to talk about copyright, and that will take a whole other time, but we sign away our rights all the time because we want to get the article published. So we sign whatever the publisher sends, and they will send things too. So we sign away our rights. Okay. Don't send your paper before you are sure that it's a bona fide institution or publisher or whatever. Do the due diligence, right? And remember, think, check, submit. If you have that as your mantra, think about it, then you check about it, and then only submit it when you're sure that it is a reputable institution or organization. And that's my presentation. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion afterwards. And I thank you very much for bringing me out every time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Salmon. Well, I was a bit worried before about these deceptive predatory journals where you're frightened even more and giving me some, and I'm fearful that by the time Prof. Landis is finished with us, we'll be even more fearful. Before I introduce Professor Landis, I would just like to acknowledge the presence of our university librarian, Mrs. Karen Liqui, and our campus librarian, Dr. Carr. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to now introduce Professor Clive Landis. He earned his BSc in biochemistry at the University of Birmingham and completed his MS and PhD degrees at Loyola University, Chicago, USA, in microbiology and immunology, respectively. He completed his postdoctoral fellowship at Imperial Cancer Research Fund, London, UK, before taking up an appointment at Imperial College London as a lecturer in cardiovascular medicine. Since relocating to the UWI in 2004 as a senior lecturer in vascular biology, Professor Landis founded a laboratory for vascular research at the Chronic Disease Research Center in Barbados and has continued publishing widely in leading specialist journals, no predatory journals. Professor Landis was awarded a chair in cardiovascular research in 2009 and was appointed the director of the CDRC in 2013. Since joining the UWI, Professor Landis has taken leadership roles to help build both national and regional capacity in healthcare sector. He has supervised several PhDs during his career at the Imperial College and at the UWI, and his administrative skills has led him to be appointed deputy principal of the campus of Cayfield campus. He has still found time to do research, and he is especially interested in this area of deceptive predatory journals, of which he has done tremendous amount of work, hence us asking him to enlighten us. So we'll ask you to help us invite him to the podium.
Thank you very much, Minerva. And thank you very much. Oh, is that the? Wait, how does this work? There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Thank you. And it was very nice to hear from Francis. Normally, when I give these talks, no one knows what this is about. What you'll soon see is that I'm more of a visual learner. So just remember all of Francis's nice words, and my pictures will just drive it all home. Okay. Still a bit challenged here. Okay. So this really illustrates the traditional publishing model. Now, as Francis said, there's nothing inherently wrong with paying a charge to the journal to have your work published. So many of the best journals, in fact, almost all of them, you have to pay something. But most of the income would come from subscriptions, as she mentioned, and really their main client in terms of the income that the traditional publishers had would be the libraries. And the libraries, as Francis has illustrated, are sophisticated clients, and they're not going to be spending the institution's money on a publishing company that isn't worth anything. And so they provided the editorial services, and the quality is assured. Okay, so this is what happens when you have open access funding. The library has disappeared from the equation. And so now you just have the author who provides the publishing fee. Again, nothing wrong with that, inherently, providing that they still provide the editorial services and the quality. So some journals like the Public Library of Science, very, very good. So that's not a problem. And of course, your researcher is ethical, everything's good. Now, the problem comes when you have a deceptive or a predatory publisher, and sometimes you will get ethical researchers who have written very good research, and they get fooled. And students are quite susceptible, as it was already mentioned, to these publishers, that some of these publishers have gotten into our database. And I don't know how they have done that, but they know the names of all the students who are graduating, and they will send letters to you. And they will say, exactly as Francis said, give us your thesis. And we'll publish it, but it means nothing can ever be published again from that. So you can be duped. However, an even bigger problem is when you have unethical researchers who know exactly what they're doing, and they're trying to publish their substandard work in a very quick way to advance their careers. And because of the nature of this topic, I've tried to put links and evidence everywhere. I want this talk to be available freely afterwards, so you can all go and check it yourself. Don't believe what Landis is saying. Look it up yourself. The Brazilians have done quite a lot of research, and the Brazilian Institute of Academy of Sciences has discovered that the typical profile of someone who is publishing in predatory journals is not a junior researcher. It is a senior researcher who is trying to seek career advancement. In my experience at this university, it is exactly that. And this affects our core values. I'm sure you've all read the strategic plan. When you're in administration, you have to know the strategic plan. but you know, these are our core values, and you know, certainly the top two of them are highly impacted if you are going to be publishing in predatory journals. So we should be very concerned. So this is the timeline of open access publishing. You know, it really has increased a lot in recent years, and these are the increase in predatory journals. They've almost sort of paralleled each other. So as this practice has taken off, this publishing practice, the predatory journals have taken off as well. And you know, don't come away from this thinking that Landis says open access publishing is wrong or inherently predatory. It's not true. And it does a lot of good things. So let's think about some of the good things. So I am not a fan of Elsevier. I mean, and I know the librarians are not either, okay? The fee that is charged by Elsevier to our library is in the millions of US dollars. And it goes up way above the rate of inflation. And certainly a investigation in Europe, you know, was very critical about the negative impact that this has had on our ability, when I say our, universities' abilities to keep up with all these inflated publishing subscription prices. So as Francis said, well, content is free to the reader. That's good, so that you're not having to, you know, hit the, you need to spend $34 just to read someone's article. And then free articles can often be well cited. So I find that some of my articles, which are in open access journals, are actually, you know, well cited. I find instinctively, having published quite a lot, they seem to be better cited than my paid subscription articles would be. And then this is quite interesting as well. You know, let's say you're in a very minor field, you know, sort of comparative beekeeping or something, you know, or even more esoteric. In open access journals, you know, if it's worth publishing, they'll publish it. It doesn't really matter what their readership is. They're not chasing readers as such. So those are the good things. But the problem, of course, has been this explosion of deceptive or predatory publishers. And it has come about because the author is now the client. And so the relationship has now cut out the library. And as I've already mentioned, you do have unethical contact on both sides. It's good evidence for that. Now, I would put to you that you'd have to be living in some sort of micro bubble if you haven't ever heard of this. So you can see this in the public press. The New York Times has had quite a lot of articles on this. Gina Colata, for you in the medical field, she's a brilliant author. So she's actually written a fantastic book about the etiology of the Spanish flu epidemic. You know, once you read it, you won't go to sleep because. And then, okay, who's ever heard of the Times Higher Education? So just in case you're living in another bubble, you all know we've been ranked by the Times Higher Education Survey, yes? And okay, so, and what percent of the top universities is UE in? Yay, okay, you've all been schooled. Yeah, so anyway, the Times Higher Education is also very worried about this rise of predatory journals, and this little one here in blue is what they call hijacked journals. So that will be exactly what Francis spoke about, where a predatory journal is using an existing journal which maybe has collapsed or they're buying it out or whatever. Okay, well, we should probably define what predatory open access publishing is. So Wikipedia, an exploitative open access publishing model that involves charging publication fees to authors without providing editorial and publishing services associated with legitimate journals, open access or not. So that's the definition. Okay, now Francis said if you fall for this, you know, you'll fall for anything. I just, when I gave this first talk, I just looked on that day's email and I came across this one, you know, dear Dr. Landis, you know, we cordially invite you to publish in Journal of Drug Development and Clinical Trials. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So it turns out that this journal is actually published out of someone's flat in Jersey. Now, I don't want to be, you know, unkind. I mean, it could be legitimate. You know, maybe he has a little publishing press in his house. But then if you dig a little bit deeper, he launched with 57 journals on one day. 57 separate journals were launched in that flat in New Jersey in one day. And there's another fairly big red flag. You have the 14-day fast-track acceptance. Note that, acceptance, you know. Fast-track acceptance. You just have to spend, you know, $1,619 and you'll get your work published. And, you know, this must be like a sort of Freudian slip. His explore and exploit. That's the catch line of the journal. Anyway, but as Francis says, go deeper, always go deeper. Okay, so this is the website, and here is the editor-in-chief. Now, I looked him up. He does seem to exist, but that is by no means any guarantee that he's the editor or that he knows that he's the editor. And exactly as Francis said. So this is, look at this, Omics are the chief spammer. Melbourne University academic associate professor Adam Bryant is named as the editor-in-chief of an omics journal, but didn't know about it until we told him, which was some Australian journalists. And obviously that is extremely unethical. So let's look at editorial practices. As Francis said, look to see who the editor is, okay? Now, Omics has this phrase on their website: election of the right editor for a journal is one of the most important decisions made by the Omics Publishing Group. Editors, executive editors, and editor-in-chief of journal must be senior researchers, i.e. chaired professors. Okay, so how do they get these editors? Well, you just click a link. They say, would you like to be an editor? And this is what came back from Omics. For the editor, editorship. Hi, I'm delighted to inform you that Peter Uneman from the Daniel Dusentrieb Institute in Germany was just appointed editor of the Omics journal, Molecular Biology. You spotted it, okay? All right, so let's see what Peter Uneman sent in his CV to the journal, which is published on their website. There he is. Peter Uneman. Okay. As a postdoc, he worked with Dr. Gutenberg, no less, the founder of the press, on multi-plagiatric high-throughput copyology. And he has completed his administrative response as Vice President of the Universe for Scientific Publication Ethics and Spamology. He's a serving editorial member of several reputed journals like the Journal of Science, High Throughput Spamology, and the Journal of Junk Publications. He's not hiding anything, folks, but this is my favorite. He has published, where is it now? Oh, well, here it is, yes. And he has published a trilogy of 5 books. And in 2011, he was awarded Fake Person of the Year. I think Trump has superseded him now, but anyway. Oh, damn. I always try to get through a meeting without saying Trump. Anyway. So, you know, come on. Okay? I mean, if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny. But it is funny. But it is serious. Okay? This is your reputation going down the drain right here. Okay? This is what anyone can see if they're looking at this Journal of Molecular Biology. and the spelling mistake. You got that? Okay. Anything that starts with global or universal or world this or that, you know, that's an immediate sort of suspect one. But again, always dig, always dig. Okay, so global science research journals, you know, they've got a raft of journals. So I went to them and I looked at their editorial boards. Okay, so this is quite interesting, this. So look at this one, the Journal of Public Health and Epidemiology. So if Ken Standard was still alive, he's probably turning in his grave. You know, this is his field. There are the so-called editors. They look fairly reputable. Oh, but hello, the Global Journal of Geriatric Care, the editors are looking a bit suspiciously the same. And the journal, the Global Journal of Virology, the editors are all identical. They're all the same for all different titles. Hello. As they say, the Chinese something Wong. And okay, so these are the kind of things that you look out for. It's just a language. You know, we're all scientists. We do not address each other like this. Greetings for the day. Have a nice and healthy day ahead. We don't talk like that. So that's always a bad sign. Yeah, and then of course, you know, send it to us. We'll get it published within the next 2 weeks. And then this, exactly what Francis was saying. You know, it's not coming from an editor. It's come from Cynthia C, who's an assistant, an editorial assistant. All the things to look out for. So, you know, this is really causing a lot of consternation. The BMJ has called it an age of academic racketeering. When Sir George Alene came across this, when it reared its head in our university, he called it academic prostitution. It's pretty furious. And then, you know, note the leopard, so it's predatory. New Statesman, Nature. Well, I've given, this is I think my 8th one now, at various parts of our university. I was drawn into this, not because I had a fascination with this topic, but we came across a very suspect individual who was actually going up for professor. And I was asked to form a subcommittee to look into it. And ever since then, I guess I've become an expert. Okay, well, here's a very interesting figure. He is basically Karen LeQuay's equivalent, the university librarian at the University of Denver. And he took it upon himself to expose these predatory journals. And boy, he's taken a lot of heat for it. And so, again, because I am providing links everywhere, so you would have noticed the link to his website, I also provide links to people who criticize, you know, his methods. And I think a very reasonable criticism is the big weakness of Beale's list. It's not based on solid data, but on Beale's intuition. I think that's probably correct. But, you know, where are we in all this? Where are the universities in this? Who was doing this? Who was exposing this? It's not the job for one man. It is our job. It's our job in our academies. But, say one thing, he could spot a fake. Okay, now this is a very seminal moment in the evolution of predatory journals. And this is such an important investigation that it has its own dedicated website. Everything is transparent. You can look through all of the items, you know, which made up this sting. And so John Bohannon was the chief science correspondent for the journal Science, and he carried out a sting operation. So his claim was that this particular lichen cures all cancer. And the article was firstly written in English, and then it was put through Google Translate, I think 4 times, and then eventually coming back to English. It was just incredibly mangled in terms of its language. When you looked at the data, it was basically a cell line which was being treated with this extract from the lichen. When you actually looked at the data and you had the concentration curve, you know, when you added more and more of the like an extract, it should be killing more. Actually, there was no curve, and the diluent itself, without any extract, was killing it. And when you looked in the text, the diluent itself was something completely lethal, like DMSO. So it doesn't really matter how you looked at this. This article was fake. It had a fake author, it had a fake institution, a fake department. Everything was fake. So 82% of the journals on Beale's list accepted the fake paper. And remember, the so-called good guys, the director of open access journals, 45% of their journals accepted it. That's the University of Lund. And so, they're not doing a great job of screening their journals either. Now, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association did better. And there were only 3 journals out on their list which published this, and 2 of them were struck off, and the other one suspended. So this is empirical evidence of the fact that this is existing. Now, when you look at the world map, there are certain hotspots. So India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Mediterranean rim countries, but really, it's all over. US, Canada, UK, most parts of the world, with the exception really of, I think, South America has come away really pretty clean. And the Caribbean only has a couple of places. So there are different parts of this diagram. You can't really read it very well. Some of it is where the publishing happens. Some of it is where the bank is. Some of it is where the head office is listed. So sometimes, the head office is listed in the UK or the US, but some of the money laundering is happening through the Caribbean. But there were actually no journals located in the Caribbean, thank God, so far. And then there have been other sting operations. I love this one. You really need to look at this one. This was a person who wrote an article to a computer science journal, and it was one sentence repeated 800 times, and it had an F-bomb in the middle. And it was accepted in 4 hours for the publication fee, obviously. This was another one where, that annoying autocorrect thing where you're writing on your cell phone and it keeps, and so he just had an entire article written with the autocorrect function, which was all complete gobbledygook. So the opening sentence was, "Atomic physics and I shall not have the same problem with a separate section for a very, very long way." I mean, it just went on like that. And it was again published. Here, this was a slight variation on the theme. You had a fake editor. And so she was touting herself around, for editorship. And her name in Polish is Dr. Fake. And, this is really disturbing. I mean, New York Times again, this is our reputation, all just being dragged through the dirt. And let it not be said, okay, I have heard this before. Oh, this is very unfair, people in developing countries, where can they publish? This is some sort of Western conspiracy. So the hotspot, the center of predatory publishing is in India. Now, the Hindu is the leading Indian newspaper. And, their chief scientific correspondents are not very happy about this. Fake journals provide the best medium to publish substandard and even highly unethical work, plagiarized contents with falsified and/or fabricated data and manipulated images. And he goes on to say, specifically in the medical field, this could be very dangerous. So, let it not be said that this is just something coming from the West. When you are engaging in predatory publishing, you're very often, actually, your fundamental sin is plagiarism. Because what you find when you look at these CVs, and I've looked at CVs from the Mona campus, the Cave Hill campus, the St. Augustine campus, where someone, has just gone to the dark side. And, you might get 20 publications in a year. And very often they're substantially the same. They're salami sliced over and over and over and over. And sometimes they're identical and they're published in 2 different journals. And so the APA, the American Psychological Association, has really taken quite a stand on this. Because some people would say, but how can you plagiarize? How could you plagiarize yourself? They have a very lovely definition of this. Just as researchers do not present the work of others as their own, which is plagiarism, they do not present their own previously published work as new scholarship. That's self-plagiarism. It's as clear as that. And you will very often see that that is part of the problem when you have predatory publishing. One of the criticisms of the John Bohannon sting operation in Science was that it only targeted open access journals. And so people said, well, what about, you know, these so-called traditional journals? Maybe they're just as bad. So this particular one that was looking to recruit a fake editor targeted all journals. And the results were quite interesting. So of those who responded, these would be on Beale's list, 33% of the 46% who responded, they accepted the fake editor. So as ever, Beale's list does spot them pretty well. Now, the Directory of Open Access Journals, they're still not that clean. They still had some, they were still sometimes accepting these fake editors, but look at this. All the titles covered by the Journal Citation Index, which is, you know, that's the real citation index that we all work towards, none of them were accepted. None of them accepted the fake editor. So the traditional system, it does work. But again, always dig, always dig. So the journal citation reports, right? So this is the genuine impact factor. There is only one, and it's from Thomson Reuters or Clarivate as it now is. But look at what's at the top. At the very top is an ad, and it's omics. And so even when you look up on Google for the standard, the gold standard of journal citation reports, there it is. Omics is muscling in right on the top. And, you know, many of the journals, they report these fake impact factors. And I've seen these in CVs, you know, global impact factor, universal impact factor. These are not genuine impact factors. They're just sort of made up ones. So it gets very confusing. So this is a genuine article about bogus impact factors. All right, but I think as Francis said, I think the tide is turning, because once the Federal Trade Commission gets involved, things get very heavy. So first of all, they charged omics for deceiving researchers. Then they put an injunction on them. Omics has completely ignored the injunction. And in May of this year, the lawyers acting for the Federal Trade Commission, they wrote this motion for a summary judgment because basically omics hasn't defended their position. And let me tell you, it is a wonderful thing to see a lawyer citing case law in high dudgeon. I mean, this is a glorious read. This is a man who is not happy, and he's bringing all of case law to bear. So I have a very strong feeling that they will pass a summary judgment, and they are looking to, they've estimated that omics has made $50 million from their fake publishing practices, and they want to fine them $50 million and close them down. Okay, so as Francis has said, pick your journal with care, extreme care. And actually, to mention about the fake conference, you actually have to be very careful and read, you know, even a little hyphen can make all the difference. So there was this case of Dave Chady told me about this. If you didn't know, Dave unfortunately has passed away, but he was a great insect researcher in St. Augustine. So the best annual conference for entomologists is called Entomology 2018, Entomology 2019. You know, so all of these guys, they turned up in Turin for Entomology 2013. And they all paid their $800 fee, and they all showed up in Turin, and there was no conference because it wasn't Entomology 2013, it was Entomology 2013, which was a fake conference. Okay, so these are some of the lists that you can go to and look for your journals and see if they're genuine. I looked at the website. On the Mona Library's website, I just sort of looked. I didn't maybe dig for hours, but I couldn't find any links to predatory journals. In my opinion, the St. Augustine website is probably the best when it comes to helping you to spot predatory journals. Cave Hill now has a very good sort of think, check, submit list. I have some of them in that folder, which is on the third seat there on the floor. So maybe I'll put it on the table on the way out and you can pick some of those up. But we have a number of places that you can go to. I love this one, University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. They have a very good library guide, and the APA has done a lot of good work. And then, of course, the Bible, you know, never leave home without it. Colin Neville, The Complete Guide to Referencing and Avoiding Plagiarism. I mean, really, such a good guide. So this is from the St. Augustine website, phony versus legit. Now, in Cave Hill, we do have access to Cabell's. And, you know, we had to pay X amount of dollars for it, but unfortunately, it's only for us. So I'm sorry about that, but I'm sure if you wrote to the library, you know, they could fiddle something or other. But Cabell's is good because it actually gives you objective infractions. So remember, the Journal of Molecular Biology, the open access journal with Peter Uneman, the fake editor. So they have spotted that that's a fake, and they list all of the infractions. It's probably a bit small, so you can't see it. So the publisher hides or obscures relationships with for-profit partner companies. The journal has misleading metrics with the words impact factor that are not Thomson Reuters, surprise fees. The journal website does not have a clearly stated peer review policy, etc., etc. So they have objective criteria. Now, I am just a little bit worried about some of our own journals in the University of the West Indies. If you actually apply some of these criteria, I don't think any of our journals are intending to be predatory, not at all. But, you know, when you look at some things like diversity of the editorial board, you shouldn't have everyone being an editor coming from one department. Okay, that's a red flag. Or coming from one campus or one country. You know, there should be a diversity in the editorial board. So we have to be a little bit careful. I would hate for one of our journals, our genuine journals, to end up on Cabell's list. So we should be a bit careful there. And unfortunately, until now, there has been evidence that academics who have used predatory publishing have advanced their careers unfairly, and they have progressed quickly. And this is some research in a Canadian business school. And, you know, he says exactly as what happened in Cave Hill when we had this quite egregious case where publications in predatory journals positively correlated with receiving internal research awards. You know, this particular individual did win our Principals Award for Research. But here's a good story. The Caribbean Journal of Nursing. I was really, really pleased with this. And this was written some years ago, really when predatory publishing was only just coming on board. And Joanna Bennett, who I don't know, but I definitely admire, was editor-in-chief of the UWI School of Nursing, and she wrote this. I'm not sure if you can read it. You know, the increasing pressure on academics to be actively engaged in research and to publish or perish led to an expectation that the journal, that's their journal, should be used to enable colleagues to meet the publishing requirements of their employers, regardless of the quality of submitted manuscripts. And, you know, we strongly resisted the Caribbean Journal of Nursing becoming what Clark and Thompson referred to as vanity or predatory journals. So kudos to Joanna Bennett from the Mona campus. And, you know, this is what happens when you publish in a predatory journal. Now, this is taken from an individual CV in the St. Augustine campus. The library was only asked to look at the number of citations, but out of these 22 of the most recent publications for this particular person going for professorship, there was only one citation. And that's because predatory articles are not listed on Thomson Reuters. They won't get cited. And then, the irony was that when you looked at the next page of this, which I'm not going to show, the person was advancing quite well in their career, publishing 1, 2 journals a year, just gradually building towards a professorship. They would have made it. But then they went to the dark side. And, when you have sort of 21 out of 22 of the most recent articles which were published in the last 2 years being in predatory journals, that's not a mistake. That's not a mistake. And this was a case from the Cave Hill campus. Our chief librarian at the time, Greta Pash, I think she actually quite liked doing this work because it's a little bit like detective work, So out of this person's CV, there was only one genuine article, which was published in Springer. And then this, happened several times. Exact duplicate of paper number 17. Exact duplicate. Other cases for this particular individual where, you had a paper and you had an abstract and you had p-values and percentages, and they were all the same. And the authors were author A, B, and C. C being the culprit. And then you had the same abstract in another journal, and the authors were now authors C, D, and E. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's unethical, unethical. So I actually would recommend that the librarians do get involved. And I think to some extent, this is now happening on all the campuses where departments, particularly appointment committees, particularly those for professor, because it goes from the faculty subcommittee and it doesn't go to the campus appointments committee, it goes to UAC. So it kind of bypasses that extra step that the campus librarian would vet new appointments. Now, we tend to call them on an ad hoc basis. We say, someone's applying for this particular post from Pakistan. I'm not liking the look of this, and they might call the library in. But I think it should be more systematic and, contract renewals, at least until you've kind of, gotten the awareness to the stage that you want it. And then as soon as it goes for external review, it can be very, very awkward. We had a case of someone who went out for external review to senior lecturer, and the reviews came back and the reviewer was trying to be kind and said, of the 7 articles that were submitted, 5 of them would be considered in journals that would be considered predatory. That reflects terribly on the university. And I would suggest that the university librarian gets involved at the professorial level so that these CVs which are presented, and there aren't that many, that they're looked at and vetted so that we don't have this. I've seen it. I don't sit on UAC anymore. But when I was sitting there, I think I came across 5 cases, really, really serious cases, where you just had the vast majority in the last few years of publications being in predatory journals. So I think it would be very useful for the librarian to come in at that point. And then, of course, sometimes you get people appointed at the level of professor. Well, actually, that goes to external review. So that's generally taken care of by the external review process. But I think the librarians wouldn't mind being involved, do you? I mean, it's quite good fun. Well, there you go. Because I did see that you had a booth, I think, at the open day. So it is fantastic seeing this, and as soon as you have the conversation, there are a lot of nuances here, okay? And when we get to questions, I'm sure that some of them will come out, but having the conversation is the key thing. Okay, so it is, I think, impacting on the integrity and the credibility, which are core values of our university. And frankly, it's a question of leadership as well, if this is going on under our watch, what are we doing as leaders? And I will just end it with the person who coined the phrase predatory journals, Richard Poinder, who is a journalist, and he said, "It is surely past time for the research community to step up and grasp this nettle." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Landis. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any questions to our, yes, can I ask you to? Any questions from the floor? While you think I'm going for my phone, I was actually sent a question on my phone by one of the deans, because he said he was unable to come because there are a lot of clashes going on. You mean it was so scary that nobody has any question? Yeah, yeah, yes. You can just identify yourself and then you just direct your question. I don't have a mic. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Well, actually, we are recording it. So if the presenters don't mind, we can disseminate through perhaps Mona messaging. We will find a way, but we're recording it, so we have it. Huh? Could be. We will see where we will disseminate, but we will certainly let you know through Mona messaging where we have disseminated. But we are actually recording. Yeah. There you go. Grad Studies just stepped in. We'll put it on Grad Studies website.
There are, like we call them, predatory books as well. So you can actually do book chapters. Normally when they come, and I come for the conferences and everything. So I normally ask for an engagement fee of $2,500 US just to accept, and then you negotiate the final cost afterwards. And, normally they don't respond. That means that I set my bar very high so that they know what I'm in for the conferences, I normally ask for round trip airfare, hotel accommodation, and complete waiver of conference fees. And they usually will respond and say, well, they can't give me all of what I asked for, but the accommodation and the registration normally bundled together, and so they will give me like a 30% fee when I can tell them something unfortunately I can't accept and move on. So sometimes I actually do engage them just for the fun of it. But yeah, I have come to not to understand the stories, and sometimes I use it. But you did mention, so in CVs now we sell a lot of book chapters. So perhaps you may want to comment on those before the cover.
So speak about building a scholarly body of work. So generally speaking, single author monographs.
So generally speaking, single-authored monographs would be valued the most, and then first-authored, peer-reviewed journals would be highly valued as well. Coming sort of below that would be book chapters, and and one thing that people seem to be falling into in our university is having edited collection and being the editor of an edited collection. Sometimes even using other people's work and just putting it together. So you might take articles which are published from Ken Standard and Georgia Lean, and and you put them together in a edited collection. That's not considered really high value scholarship. And so book chapters, just to answer that question, are somewhere in the middle in terms of how they're valued. Now, you have to be very careful again, because people can try to entice you into very poor quality work, where you would find your book chapter sitting next to something in a completely different field, and you would find actually that it hasn't really gone through proper peer review. And sometimes when you look at the publisher and you do the due diligence, you find that it is in fact a predatory journal. And so I don't know if the question's going to come, what happens if I have one of these on my CV? well, you know, if you delete it, that looks a little bit deceptive yourself because you've published it and you've accepted, you know, and you've signed the deal with that company. My best advice that I can give is that you move it from peer-reviewed publication and you put it into non-peer-reviewed and just put it there. Because I actually used to give the advice of just delete it, but then the lawyers told me, you know, you've done it. And if you now are just removing it from your CV, in some way that shows deception. So my advice now, I think, would be to take it from peer-reviewed and you just put it under non-peer-reviewed, where it really doesn't matter so much.
Well, Georgiana first, and then Jennifer after.
You have sharing voice.
Yes, I do. I'm a big mouth. For Mona, normally we get the requests coming through, not so much appointments committee, but sometimes the deans, because I got a recent request from a dean of a faculty. And again, as you say, Prof, the person was up for professorial appointment. And we had to do a review of a particular two items on the CV. So it sometimes comes through. I have had 2 occasions where faculty members have written to me personally, and I think it was after Mrs. Salmon did a presentation to the Faculty of Humanities and Education last year or the year before, because she presented to their faculty board about similar, but more, I think she dealt with copyright issues and so, and plagiarism. But I had 2 faculty members who actually wrote to me saying that their papers had been accepted by a particular journal. I just wanted to check. Unfortunately, those 2 journals were predatory journals. So I get individuals and I just do a check. Sometimes I'd send it to a librarian in the medical library if it's a medical related, or I may pass it. But the Mona Information Literacy Unit, I think the head is supposed to be here somewhere, or the former head of Milieu, which is the unit in the library that deals with doing sessions for undergraduates, working with graduate studies for thesis scrutiny. So they help the graduate students to go through their list so that for them to avoid plagiarism. I don't think it's formalized as yet, but I do know that there are some times when it comes to that unit. Is that so, Mrs. Robinson, when the lists, so we can deal with it, but I think if it goes through the dean, it's more likely, or if a faculty member is requesting assistance for a particular item, not so much just going through their entire CV. One of the things that we recommended last year, because the head of the medical branch library and met with Dr. Tomlin Paul, and one of the things that we were recommending from the library is that we could have sessions with, like this kind of session, with faculty members in a particular faculty. And we could also have training sessions for admin assistants who we would take through the process of what they should be looking for, and so they would be empowered really to assist in going through, taking the faculty members through what they need to be looking for on their CV. So that's something that we can do as well, because you understand that sometimes we may, if it's coming through appointments committee. Last week we were in appointments committee and we had like I think like 40 cases for medical sciences alone. Now, if you're going through 40 CVs at one go, you realize that is a lot. So if we are empowering the faculty and also the admin staff to understand what it is that you're supposed to be looking for, then we might be better able to deal with those kinds of requests. Yeah.
No, I mean, this is a very good point. That's exactly what we found on our campus, where, you know, the alpha candidate, shall we say, was just surrounded with a hotspot of predatory publishing, and it was impacting all of the colleagues in the department and junior colleagues, and it was very disturbing. You know, we had to, you know, on the one hand, we took a hard line on, you know, the alpha, the index case, but we were very supportive of the junior faculty and tried to assist them. But, you know, that work is gone. Once it's published, it's gone, as Francis said.
Because I've had cases where I go to a conference, and I think you mentioned it. I go to and immediately within 3 weeks after presenting a paper, I get a number of people writing to me, asking me about my paper. When I was done with my doctoral work, within a month, I got these, they were calling them at the time, these vanity publishers. We've had a case in the Faculty of Humanities. When I was in the faculty, there were 3 faculty members who got caught. So for junior faculty, if you presented a paper at a conference and you immediately get inundated with a number of requests to publish your paper, you have to talk with another faculty member. You kind of have to have your ears and eyes and everything so alert, because the people are coming at you, and because the environment is such. I was just saying to the university librarian that I didn't even save. I saw that you saved these things. I just delete. I will literally delete when I see them coming. But it would be good to save them so that we can have them for teaching purposes, to show persons, listen, this is what you need to. They're coming at you. And if they're coming at you, as Francis says, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. If you're getting so many people asking you about a presentation you did, no, man, yeah, because you didn't write to this journal. For these journal, listen, you know how long we have to take to get a paper published in a journal. I mean, it's long. Sometimes you cry. I mean, you know, things are thrown back at you, rejected, and you bawl. And so if you're getting so many people asking you to publish, you have to, as junior faculty, as senior faculty, you have to think twice. Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was another person before?
No.
Oh, okay.
And then this gentleman.
Okay. Francis. Yeah, I think it was.
Dr. Carr, we did try, didn't we? We tried, but we didn't have any money.
Because I heard the comment that we are one university and why did that KJ? Well, KJ probably had a good money at the time.
I mean, you know, we would like it to be available.
Yeah, but it's not possible. She said when she tried to get it for the entire university, it was prohibited. So we'll have to just do, I'm going to have to appeal to our principal to get it from her now. There's no two ways about it because even though Beals is out there,
No, but Beals has withdrawn.
yeah,
So it's
he's back up though.
it's back up.
But he's back up. He's back up. He's back up. But the
Okay.
thing with Canada is that because you have to pay, people are recognizing that as, and then it has gone through some deals, some of it, as people say, or like guts, right? And this is a database. This is a subscription we can do.
What was the question again? I can't remember the first question.
To say something about that, about the fact that it should be available from the library, something that they will do, because they're still tied over the payment. There's some journals that don't have time yet, so they don't get paid for because they have money. They just not there, they don't have the money. And we've been trying for years, and I said, where I'm asking the faculty to help, because you are our workers. We are not working apart from the faculty. But when we come sometimes to university libraries, campus libraries, our campus principals, it's very easy for them to say the library doesn't cut them. But the issue is we do not exist because we are the library. We exist because of our faculty, right? And so I think we need to make sure that the relationship between the librarians and the library and the faculty is far more integrated and far more strategic, right? So the issue about Colette, when I it was really ridiculously priced, and we just dropped things Colette. $1 million with our annual subscription to the university. You know what it is to the university, okay? And what we found that the use of Elsevier was not just relaxing. I don't think people understand that. The faculty was just downloading. But Elsevier, I'm just giving you a bit about journal publishing. It's expensive. When Elsevier looks at the university directory, you know what they do? They go and check to see which of our sisters are publishing in their journals. Okay? And we see that, and you can name the names of the people who have published, not just publishing, their articles are being cited across the world. And that's part of the Times Higher Education ranking. What is the reputation of the university? Are our publishers citing that system? Right? And so when you talk about places like Cornell University, for example, or Stanford University, they don't have too much of a problem with Elsevier. Why? Because if you look at the people who publish in Elsevier journals and look at the authors coming from Cornell, Stanford, they can't negotiate the Elsevier. So we're not paying $1 million. We have 45% of our authors publishing in journals. At this point in time, they could negotiate with Elsevier. We did not have that kind of throughput that we could even negotiate. But I want to say one thing about that Elsevier thing, which I don't think I've said it, but I want you to hear it. There's a big research in campus. When you suspended Elsevier, here's what I said, $1 million US university or for campuses. When we suspended, we told the faculty, told academics, we are not preventing you from what you are taking. You have to let us know, because we found out that if you buy, and I'll sit there and get, she doesn't want $1 million, okay? We are actually
No, before. Your first.
You're right, Berger. And I think I want to come back because I know Professor Lapis is one of those. He threw it out to me and he realized I did not make the budge. When he tried to get a library involved with stuff, that's what librarians do. We know about information. We know where to point to for open science, journal or open, And as well, if you're publishing, you're young faculty, if you can't get or efficient to get in your the more experienced faculty members. Be a librarian. Because it's still about we are trainers in service knowledge. It means we can go and find out. You say you want to publish a particular journal, and we can tell you